Today we are talking about circulation, which is great stuff. Here are some jokes / cartoons. Get you in the mood. Quality stuff. I always struggle as to whether or not I should read them to you. I feel like reading them to you kills it. So look at them and enjoy. No one's laughing, so I'm assuming you're still reading them. Or they're not as funny as I thought. This one kills me. I thought that's hilarious. It's a killer whale. Get it? 3 smug grins is all I get. You guys are lame. All right, biology fact for the day. A medium-sized cumulus cloud weighs about the same as 80 elephants, 1 million pounds. Pretty wild to think that clouds weigh millions of pounds. This is only a medium-sized one. I don't know how much a large-sized one weighs. 100 elephants? I don't know. Yeah. Water weighs a lot when it's super massive. Clouds are bigger than you think. Study tip is to eat before you do long study sessions, right? If you're going to sit down and study for 3 or 4 hours for a test, or just in general, you say, okay, I have 3 hours and I'm just going to study for a variety of classes, a variety of topics, whatever it is. If you eat before you do that, you will be very grateful, because halfway through you're going to go, oh, well, I'm hungry, and then you're going to snack, and then you're going to get distracted. And so if you know you're going to have to sit down for a pretty considerable amount of time to study, try and eat beforehand. It does make a difference. All right. So before we actually start talking about material from Monday and today, questions or topics you want to spend more time on, things that you guys are struggling to understand. You came here assuming I would tell you everything you need to know. Yeah. Standard. All right. Then I'm just going to roll with it, I guess. We're going to spend most of the time focusing on the heart, I would say. One person nodded, thank you. There's a lot to know, right? You have to know pretty much all the parts. Be grateful. When I took this class, you also had to memorize all of the valves, semilunar valves and tricuspid valve, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? You just have to know chambers and pathways, essentially, and we'll look at that. But
can we also go into gas exchange, the correct flow of air into the lungs?
Yeah, so you're saying you breathe in, then lungs, then all that. Yeah, that's toward the end, but yeah, definitely. Other questions, other stuff you want to focus on? Because I guarantee I can't cover everything. So if I don't cover it, it's your fault for not telling me. All right, so what animal is this? Nobody? It's a generalized example. I just wanted to mess with you guys. It's not an animal. It's just a generalization of how animal circulation works, right? So all animals have a mouth through which they take food, an anus through which they discard waste, an exchange surface through which they acquire oxygen and expel carbon dioxide, and then some kind of circulatory system and a metabolic waste disposal system, right? And this is how they eat, breathe, and pump blood, right? All animals have to do this. Now, some animals, it's all the same, right? Jellyfish have one opening, right? That's their mouth, that's their anus, that's how they breathe, that's how they eat, that's everything, right? Some organisms like us have more than one, right? But you have to have all of those things in order to be considered an animal, right? Otherwise, you just don't function that way. So, let's look at some of the examples, because again, generalized, this is just what everyone has to have. Real world examples, so this is a hydra, okay, but again, another example would be like a jellyfish, right? Or, oh, I forget the name, but they're those underwater plants. They look like this. I can't remember the name. Some of them are huge. Like I saw a picture of a guy standing inside of one, right? They're massive. Anyway, they're all gastrovascular, okay? So meaning they have 1 to 2 cell width of a body, right? So jellyfish only have 1 or 2 cell layers, right? So they don't have to have a very complex circulatory system. Why not? It's only 2 cells, right? And so the diffusion distance is only about 1 to 2 cells wide. So it doesn't take a lot of energy, it doesn't take a lot of complexity to get nutrients and oxygen and those kinds of things in and out. It's just 1 or 2 cells, right? Sometimes it takes almost no energy. Some jellyfish, just by swimming through the water alone, pick up almost all the nutrients they need because they're almost transparent, right? And things just flow through. So it's a pretty easy way to live your life. They don't even have a brain, so kind of cool. Sorry, questions on this before I go on? There's a quiz at the end. You don't know whether or not I'm serious, do you? There is a quiz at the end, but it's a fun quiz. All right, open and closed circulation, right? The other two basically kinds of circulation that animals have. Okay, so open, well actually I think this is the common features first. So open and closed circulatory systems have 3 things in common. Circulatory fluid, right, so blood or hemolymph, like for insects. Vessels, so blood vessels, veins, arteries, etc. And some kind of a pump, usually heart. And this I think got cut off, blood pressure, right? It's a pump. It's literally a pump that creates the pressure. If you don't have pressure, how's your blood going to get from here to here, right? It's got to fight against gravity, so it's got to have pressure, right? All open and closed circulatory animals have to have some kind of a pump, and it's usually a heart, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a pseudo heart per se. Questions here? So, this is what an open circulatory system looks like. It's pretty obvious why it's called open, right? So how does it work? Somebody walk me through it. Most of us get how a closed system works, but we'll talk about it. How does an open one work? We talked about it in class, so not a totally unfair question. Yeah, that's where this hemolymph comes from, right? So insects that have an open circulatory system don't have blood, they have hemolymph. And it's blood-like, right? It serves much of the same purpose, but it just flows through their whole body, right? So Dr. Bobeck said if you ever squish an insect and you get sort of that greenish, blackish goo that comes out, that's their hemolymph, right? You don't have to sever an artery or a vein or anything like that to get it because it's just everywhere. Their whole body is just full of this fluid and it just moves around, right? Their heart pumps it around, so their heart sucks it in and then pumps it around and sends it, to the brain, to the limbs, to the wherever, right? But it's not closed off. It's just going wherever it goes, right? It's not the most effective system, but when you're, grasshopper sized, it's also not that big of a deal, right?
So is that something like that they're like a grasshopper's intaking for that to make hemolymph?
How do they make hemolymph?
Yeah.
Pretty much in the same way that we make blood, right? We take in our nutrients. We have bone marrow, right, to help us make blood and all that. They take it in, and I don't know the exact mechanism behind how hemolymph is made, but again, they eat their food and then their body turns that into hemolymph. Bugs obviously don't have bone marrow. I don't know exactly how they do what they do. Okay, so then a closed circulatory system obviously is going to be the opposite. Everything is enclosed. It works in the same way. Okay, so somebody just run me through how a closed circulatory system works. You can use yourself as an example if you'd like, because you have one. Not quite yet the pathway the blood takes. We'll take a look at that in a second, but just kind of an overview of how does a closed circulatory system work. It's easier than you think. Maybe I'm psyching you out. This isn't a super hard question.
Well, we have like veins and arteries that hold our blood, and that's what keeps it enclosed.
Perfect. So heart full of blood, pumps it to veins or arteries. Arteries, right? That's why if you cut an artery, it's a lot more serious than cutting a vein, right? Because the artery's coming out of your heart. So you're pumping around 120 milligrams of mercury of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. You cut it and it'll spray, right? Like far, a couple feet, right? So it goes out to your arteries, and we'll look at the whole. So I'll just generalize right now. Out to your arteries, through your body, but it all stays in a closed system, right? It never, you don't just have blood like floating around. If you do, that's called internal bleeding, and it's very bad. So it goes out to your arteries, out to your body, to your, how does it come back? Veins, right? And then it comes back, right? Sound good? Also, fun fact, veins are not blue. They just look blue because of your skin, right? All of your blood vessels are pretty much reddish because they're full of blood. Sort of like a reddish gray. I don't even know how to describe it, also because I'm colorblind, but they're not blue. So, and the whole deoxygenated blood being blue thing is also a myth. I figured that out when I was like 12, though. I was like, well, whenever I get my blood drawn, it doesn't turn blue, so. And it's into a vacuum tube, like there's no air in there. Anyway, it's not blue, it's all red, always, because of the iron, in case you were wondering. So, I kind of gave you guys a cheap blow on this one. You have to go and learn the differences. I gave you the similarities, right? Somebody tell me one of the three similarities for open and closed systems. They have circulatory fluid, either blood or hemolymph. What's another one? I heard a bunch. Pump, so for example, your heart, okay, and the last one? Vessels, right? Veins, arteries, capillaries, all that, something to hold the blood, right? So, yeah, never mind. You get to go and find the differences, right? And you get to learn for yourself, okay? Cool beans? Not cool beans? You guys pissed? Doesn't matter. All right. Questions before I keep going? No? Nobody's even going to dare to ask me the differences between the systems? No? All right. So there's two kinds of circulation in animals, right? Well, not all animals, but fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. This is also when I found out that birds are technically reptiles. I saw that and I was like, what? Reptiles except birds. Birds are reptiles. So, pretty weird. So fish have single circulation, meaning that the blood leaves the heart, gets oxygenated in the gills, goes into the body, runs out of oxygen because it's been used, and straight back into the heart in just one loop, right? It gets put into the heart, comes out, gets oxygen, goes to the body, goes back into the heart. Single circulation, right? So amphibians are part of double circulation. They have you don't need to know the term for it, but their heart doesn't have a separation in the middle. Do you guys see that? It's called a septum. They don't have a septum. So deoxygenated blood enters the right side of the heart, right, and goes up to get oxygenated, but then comes back into the same area and goes out to the body and then comes back in. Anybody see a problem with this? Yeah, it's not a closed system, right? I mean, it is a closed system, but that part isn't separated, right? So deoxygenated blood and oxygenated blood are just mixing around. So it's not very efficient, let's put it that way. It works, right? Most amphibians are pretty darn small, and their skin functions like a lung, so they can breathe in insane amounts of air, right? They're constantly breathing just by standing there, so they get plenty of air. But if a horse were to try and use this system, it'd pass out after like 3 minutes and just never wake up, right? It's not the most effective. So amphibians have to be pretty small in order to make this work. Cool beans? All right, reptiles, except birds, have a mostly separated system, but there's that little gap right there at the top. So there is still some mixing. But again, same pattern, enters the right side, goes up to the lungs, comes in to the left side, goes down to the body, and then back up. Anybody notice a difference?
It's like coming out of the top.
Say that again.
It's like coming out of the top of
Talking right here?
that.
Yeah, and then it's coming down without getting oxygenated by the lungs, right? I have no idea who decided that this was the best way for lizards to pump their blood. It's dumb. But yeah, that's what they do. There's a channel specifically for deoxygenated blood to go to the body. It's useless and it's stupid, which is why we are the superior species, right? And horses. Yeah, so that's just something to know and something to note. Again, as always, if there's an exception, if there's a weird whatever, that's always something that could be on the test, just as a way to gauge whether or not you were paying attention. If you know that lizards, I say lizards, all reptiles except birds, have that weird extra, I guess it would be an aorta. Yeah, it's the right systemic aorta. It is a weird exception. I don't know why this happened. Someone much smarter than me probably knows how this arose, but to me it just seems really dumb. All right, questions till there? Everybody feeling it? All right. Mammals and birds have a fully separated system, right? The septum between chambers is fully formed. So their deoxygenated blood comes into the right side, goes up to the lung capillaries to get oxygenated, comes back into the left side, atria, then ventricle, always remember that, then down to get into the body, and then back up. Make sense? So it makes you wonder, maybe fish have a better system because they just do it all in one go, right? Ours seems a little overly complicated. It was just so that biology would be harder. It's the only reason. Questions to there? We still haven't quite hit the depth of the human heart, so we'll get into that, but questions on this?
So with that kind of open circulatory system with fish, do they even have like blood pressure?
They do. Their heart still creates pressure, and it pumps blood in this direction, and then the inverse pressure, negative pressure, pulls it back up. Yeah. So any animal has to have blood pressure, otherwise blood or hemolymph won't move. So everyone, all animals have to have blood pressure. That's a good question, though. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. What the? All right, other questions?
What kind of questions would they ask? Besides, like, give me which of these is not a single circulation kind of thing?
Yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. What kind of test questions could you see on this? I'll turn that back to you guys since you're the ones going to take the test. What kind of questions do you think you would see on the test from this kind of material? Not rhetorical. You could see something like that. You could see maybe what is a potential flaw in the circulatory system of amphibians, or lacking a septum in the heart causes what issue in amphibians? Being, deoxygenated and oxygenated blood are going to mix, so it's going to reduce the efficiency, something like that, definitely. Do I dare ask if anyone else has one so we can sit in silence for another 5 minutes? I'm going to assume that's a no, because I don't want to wait that long. But that's a really good skill to have. You guys have to be able to do that. You have to be able to ask yourself, what could be on a test related to this? This one didn't have like a plethora, so I'm not surprised that there weren't hands up immediately, but be able to do that at pretty much any point in any class of any material. Ask yourself, what would a professor ask about this? It's an excellent way to study. Okay? Other questions? All right. This is where the fun begins. You have to know pretty much all of this. And that sounds awful, but again, 2 years ago when I took it, you had to know the valves as well, so be grateful. All right, so let's break it down. Start at 1. What's this? Right? Ventricle, right? So a heart, more or less, this is awful. That's not what I wanted to do at all. We'll just go like that. That's a heart, right? Split in half. Has 4 chambers, okay? Atria are kind of A-shaped, if you want to think about it that way. And ventricles are pretty V-shaped, if you want to think about it that way. Which side's which? What's this side? That's the right, okay? So you have to think about it backwards, because again, it's mirrored to you because it's inside your body, right? So this is your right side of your heart and left side. Okay, so you have a right atrium and right ventricle, and a left atrium and a left ventricle. So which side does deoxygenated blood come into? Always to the right. Into what? What first? Atrium or ventricle? Atrium, right? So even though this is labeled as number 1 in the diagram, that's not where the blood enters, right? And again, it's all a loop, so it's kind of relative to where you want to start. But deoxygenated blood enters your right atrium. Then it goes into the right ventricle. Does it have oxygen yet? No. Okay, so where's it got to go? To the lungs. How does it do that? Artery, right? Which kind? Pulmonary, right? If you speak any Latin-based language, pulmón is lung in Spanish, right? Pulmonary always means about lungs, right? So this is the artery to your lungs. Arteries always go from your heart to somewhere else, okay? So, still deoxygenated, right? Hence the blue, goes into the capillaries of your lungs, right? And it has to go to both lungs, so you have, 2 branches in your pulmonary artery, 1 to each lung. Goes into the capillaries. So as you are breathing and sucking air into your lungs, it then gets into your alveoli, which are directly connected to your capillaries. So they diffuse from alveoli into the capillary, the oxygen does, gets bound to the red blood cells, right? More specifically to what? Hemoglobin, right? Oxygen binds to the hemoglobin in your blood and then continues on its way, okay? You guys with me so far? All right, so now where are we going to go? From the lung back to the heart, right? The left atrium. How do we get there? Pulmonary vein, right? So same idea, except now backwards. So it's from the lung to the heart. So it's still pulmonary because it's from the lung, but because it's into the heart, it's now a vein, right? Like I said, veins go into the heart. Arteries leave the heart, okay? Try and pound that into your brain. Okay, so we've gotten into the left atrium. Where do we go now? Into the left ventricle, right? And then where? To your body, right? So either up into your head and just torso area, or down into your lower half, right? How does it get there? Through your aorta, right? So that would probably be the worst part of your heart to damage or break or cut or anything like that, right? It's what gets oxygen from your heart to your body. So if you were to sever your aorta somehow, you'd probably die within a minute or two. You're going to bleed out very fast, right? So if people get shot, whenever they say like, oh, it missed the aorta by 1 centimeter, right, in Gray's Anatomy or whatever, it always misses by 1 centimeter. That's what they're talking about, right? That most important branch that takes oxygenated blood to the rest of your body. If it were to hit a vein, wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, still an issue, still got to fix it, but hit the aorta or some kind of major artery, probably toast, unless you can get to a doctor very fast, right? Okay, so it gets into your whole body, right? And now it goes from red to blue because it gave the oxygen to your cells, right? Guys with me there? Okay, so where do we go now? Back into the heart, right? Back into the right atrium. So we can start it all over again. How do we get there? The vena cava, right? There's 2 kinds because you're coming from 2 areas. So there's the anterior and the posterior. Anterior meaning upper, posterior meaning lower, right? You'll also sometimes see them as superior and inferior. Superior, upper, inferior, lower. So either way, for this class, you'll probably always see it as anterior and inferior. But if you ever see superior and inferior, same thing. Okay? Guys with me? Questions? You guys wondering whether or not I actually watch Gray's Anatomy? I do not. My wife does, so I know what's up.
What's like the size? Is a artery and a vein like going into the heart roughly the same size, or like arteries bigger?
Directly connected to the heart, they're about the same size. Veins may be a little bit smaller. Outside the heart, arteries are definitely a lot larger, right? So like the artery running down your legs is, I can't remember the number. It's pretty thick. Whereas veins, like in your arms, obviously you guys know, not exactly huge. They're like spaghetti noodles. So the further you get from the heart, the bigger the difference, but pretty close to the heart, arteries are just a little bit bigger. You probably won't be tested on that though. It's just fascinating. I love this kind of stuff. I'm very into anatomy and physiology, as you can tell. and I know a little bit too much about it. No, I don't know enough. That's why I have to take anatomy, and it sucks. Questions? Okay, so we did a whole loop, right? You need to be able to do that path on your own, right? You need to be able to, at any point, if someone were to just say, blood enters the left atrium, where's its next location? Where will it go next? Left ventricle, right? Blood enters the right ventricle, where will it go next? The aorta, right? You may have been tempted to say that it would go to the lungs, or sorry, not the aorta. It'll go to the pulmonary arteries, okay? You may have been tempted to say it'll go to lungs. Yes, it goes from the right ventricle to the lungs, but how does it get there? Pulmonary artery, right? So you can't skip steps either. The wording may make you think, oh, well, it goes from here to here, true, but you can't miss the pathway that it takes, right? So know all 11 of these, right? Be able to draw it. For time constraints, and because I know you guys don't exactly love it, I'm not going to make you draw this pathway, but I highly, highly, highly recommend go home, draw this over and over and over and over and over. Color code it if you want, red and blue, number it, label it, do everything, right? And so that when you sit down for a test and it asks a question, the best thing would be to have drawn it out on your little scratch paper that the testing center gives you, right? And then you don't have to go, oh, well, let's see. It's like you just look at the paper that you've already drawn on and just go, oh yeah, here, 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 right? It will save your life. Be able to draw this, right? Plus, if any of you go on in biology, past biology 1620, you're going to want to know it anyway, right? And then you're going to take physiology and anatomy, and it's worth knowing. This is one of the few things that I still have pretty well memorized from this class. You use it a lot. All right, that's enough of that. Let's talk about how we actually move the blood around, right? We've said, oh, it goes from here to here to here to here, but how are we actually moving it, right? It's not just flowing on its own, right? Because it's a pump. You don't just turn on the tap and blood just starts to move. You have to pump it. So there's two states of pumping, per se, diastole and systole. So diastole is the relaxation, right? So you pump, and then diastole is when you unpump, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. The way I remember it is diastole sounds like die, and it's like your heart died, right? Obviously not, but that's how I remember it. Your heart, relaxes, and it's dead for a second, right? Systole is that pump back up, right? When it squeezes. So I think systole squeeze, right? It contracts all your heart muscles, not at the exact same time, but your heart contracts kind of in an uneven pattern. That's why you get like a lub-dub. Lub-dub is your heart isn't pumping all at once, but it moves through it, right? You guys with me so far? My hand making sense to you? It's not making sense to me. So you pump about 5 liters a minute. Anybody know how much blood you have in your body? It's about 5 liters. So your blood makes it through your entire body in about a minute. Which is pretty wild if you think about it. I mean, we're talking like starts in your heart, does the whole circuit, gets to every capillary in your entire body, and is back to the heart in about a minute. If you're running and your heart rate's higher, then it's faster, and if you're like sleeping, it's lower, but just average heart rate. If you're morbidly obese, it's probably also way skewed, but this is about your regular stroke heart rate, So cardiac output, that being your 5 liters a minute, so your heart rate is about 70 beats a minute for an average person. If you're more fit, it'll be a little bit lower. If you're less fit, a little bit higher. And then it's the amount of blood expelled by your left ventricle. Okay, that's very specific, right? It's the amount of blood that comes out of your left ventricle. So you multiply heart rate, being that 70 beats a minute, by stroke volume, so how much blood actually gets squeezed out of your ventricle and into your body, That's your cardiac output, right? So it says average 5 minutes. But if you were able to somehow measure for yourself, because we can, but if you could like feel it, then you could just take, your heart rate, go like, oh, I'm like 73, and then just times that by how much blood comes out. That's your cardiac output. You won't probably see a test question that's like, if someone's heart rate is this and their stroke volume is that, what's their cardiac output? But you could see something like, in order to find cardiac output, you multiply the heart rate by something like that. Although if you know that and you were to get a question with numbers, again, you would just say, oh, well, I know that it's heart rate times stroke volume. So just know that. If you got one with numbers, it would probably be easy numbers like 70 and 20. I don't know. Not like earth-shattering difficulty. You guys with me? Okay. So, how do we make the heart do this, right? Doesn't have like a little hand in there to like push and squeeze, right? So how does the heart do this? It's with the pacemaker cells. It's where the term pacemaker comes from, like an artificial heart. It's setting the pace for your heart. If you don't need a pacemaker like most people, your heart does this on its own. And it's actually really accurate, and it can do it without the help of the brain, which I think is pretty wild. You have your own closed system in your heart, where if your brain stops working, your heart can keep pumping. Not forever, because it'll run out of energy and all that, but your heart pumps alone, right? So you can take the heart out of the body, and it'll pump for, I want to say like half an hour, completely unassisted. And they can plug the heart into a machine, and it'll pump forever on its own. They don't even have to like put an electrode on it or anything. The heart just pumps on its own. And if it gets its own nutrients, then it'll pump forever. It doesn't need a brain. It doesn't need anything. It'll just go. So I would Google that. There's super cool videos. I should have had one. Really, really cool videos of hearts outside the body, just laying there with some tubes in it, and it just goes. And blood just comes in and out. I think it's sweet. Anyway, two kinds, pacemaker cells. Sinoatrial and atrioventricular. So sinoatrial, where would you guess that is? Based on the name or on what's on there. Oh, maybe not even on there. Oh, it is on there. What would you guess? It's in the atrium, right? Sinoatrial node is in your atrium, okay? I point like you guys would know what I'm pointing at. Here, right? So the sinoatrial node in your atrium. Then, so this has the fastest rhythm, and that's going to set your heart rate, right? So however fast the SA node is clicking off, I guess if you want to put it that way, that's your heart rate, okay? So if it's doing it 70 times a minute, you get a heart rate of 70 beats a minute. If it slows down, that slows your heart rate. If it speeds up, that speeds up your heart rate, okay? The atrioventricular node is slower, okay? This is so that your blood has time to get in. Because if the heart were pumping at 70 beats a minute everywhere, there just wouldn't be time. Your heart wouldn't be able to keep up, right? So it beats at 70 per minute in the atrium, but between the atrium and the ventricle, hence atrioventricular, it's about half that, well, a little over half that, just to give it the time to catch up, right? So it's about 45. And that's here, not really like in between them, but it's what leads from the atrium to the ventricle, so atrioventricular.
So is it on both sides of the heart, right? And
so you're saying is it in this and this and this and this?
yeah.
Is it in both halves? No. It's just in the right half, because that's where the blood will re-enter. So this pumps it down, and then these are called Purkinje fibers. I guess the branches are called Purkinje fibers, and this is the bundle of His, spelled like his. This just conducts that signal to the other half, so that it also follows. So they're in the right side but communicating with the whole heart. Does that make sense? As far as I'm aware, you don't have to have ECG states memorized. Did she say anything about that? I didn't miss it, right? Like PRQ or P or T waves or anything like that? No, okay. Then never mind. You'll learn about it eventually. But that's just each wave in your heart rate that you see on the monitor has a name. So it may come up, it may not. For now, don't worry about it. Questions on this?
So sinoatrial nodes and atrioventricular nodes are both pacemaker cells.
Yes. Yeah. So they're producing the electrical signal that makes your heart squeeze. Others? Okay. So, what can go wrong? A lot of things. We'll just talk about these two: atherosclerosis and hypertension. I can't even say it. Atherosclerosis, your arteries get hard. They actually like harden up, right? If you were to cut open someone with atherosclerosis and touch their arteries, they're firm, and they shouldn't be. They're squishy normally, but these are almost like rock hard, which is not good. So, because it interferes with circulation, right? Can't really pump as well through a hard artery. Because they get so hard, they can break a lot easier, right? A regular artery is kind of squishy, so it can, you can press on it and you can fall and it doesn't do anything. But if you have atherosclerosis and you fall or get punched in the chest or something, your arteries will shatter, which is obviously not good. If that happens in a coronary artery, so the one that taking blood back into your heart muscle, right? Because your heart needs blood too. So if you shatter a coronary artery or break a coronary artery, have any kind of issue with a coronary artery, you have a heart attack, right? An infarction, coronary infarction, coronary infarction, cardio infarction. One of the two. It's a heart attack, right? The cells in your heart die. If you break blood vessels to your brain, you have a stroke, a cerebral infarction. They're the same thing, but because they happen in different places, they're called a different thing. So if you have a stroke, you had a heart attack in your brain, is a way to think about it, right? But it's just due to coronary arteries or brain blood vessels breaking. And it doesn't only happen with atherosclerosis. It can happen for no reason, right? Perfectly healthy people can just, boom, have a heart attack. It's rare, but it can happen. Okay? You guys with me? Hypertension is the scientific term for high blood pressure, right? This is kind of a, I don't know why my sister's calling me. This is a misleading sentence. The cause of high blood pressure is unknown, is trying to say in a specific person, usually we don't know why they have high blood pressure, right? I could get high blood pressure tomorrow. I consider myself a fairly healthy person. I could get high blood pressure tomorrow and the doctor would just say, we don't know why, it just happened, right? It doesn't mean we don't know what it is, right? It's usually like plaque buildup in your veins and arteries, right? And it makes the blood push through faster than it should, so your blood pressure goes up, right? So this can lead to atherosclerosis. That's the real issue. High blood pressure, probably not going to kill you. But the effects of prolonged high blood pressure probably will kill you, right? So there are things you can do to avoid it, diet and exercise and all that. But we haven't pinpointed like this is what causes hypertension. Got it? Questions? Okay, we got 5 minutes left, which means it is quiz time. Guys ever played Kahoot before? It's a good time. I love Kahoot. We'll probably do more than a few of these this semester. I didn't do any last semester that I remember. I don't know why. I was lazy. No, I don't know. I love them. So we're going to play one. All you have to do is take out your phone and go to kahoot.it, right? And then, so this kahoot.it, and put in this number, 259902. And it'll ask you to make a username. It's got to be appropriate, or I will get rid of it. It can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be your name. It can be an emoji. It can be a nickname. It can be a gang name. Anybody here in a gang or any gangs in Logan? Watermelon plus the emoji, just in case we weren't sure. Same time. It's a little late for that. Double strawberry. Obviously superior to single strawberry. Anybody still trying to get in, or can I go? Raise your hand if you're still trying to get in. Okay, I'll give you some. Was that you? The monkey? Or was that you? I'm just trying to make you say that. Everybody knows your code now. Okay, we ready? 3, 2, 1. Are you ready? Which of the following is not a characteristic of open and closed circulatory systems? To get the right answer the fastest, right? The faster you get it, the more points you get. So, almost all of you got it right. Gastrovascular cavities are a different type of circulatory system, right? All open and closed have a heart, vessels, and circulatory fluid. Okay? If at any point you're confused on why the answer is what it is, ask. All right, Dawson the pig is winning. Which of the following organisms has a single circulatory system? Oh, that was fast. Everybody's like, which one says fish? It's fish. All right, everyone got that one. I lowballed that one for you. The anterior and posterior vena cava. Most of you got it. It's the right atrium, right? It looks like a decent put right ventricle. It goes right atrium, then right ventricle, right? So you were just one step ahead. Dawson's still winning it. Somebody's got to dethrone them. Blood flows from the left ventricle to the rest of the body. Oh, everyone but two got it. The aorta. Oh. Dawson's still killing it. Oh, he's only up by like 30, though. Systole is when... almost everyone. The heart contracts, right? Diastole is when it dies, air quotes, because it relaxes. Systole is when it squeezes. Whoa! DeAndre. Nice. Diastole. I gave this one away. Hit it as fast as you can. A bunch of you assumed that I put them in the same order. I'm the worst. Oh, and I got rid of everyone on that one. Now Beth's winning it. To find cardiac output, you multiply heart rate by... stroke volume. Everybody got that one. Beth's killing it. Atherosclerosis in blood vessels leads to... Stroke. Most of you put heart attack. Heart attack is if it's in the artery leading to the heart. It's a stroke if it's in your blood vessels. So they're the same thing, but they're called different conditions depending on where they occur. Blood vessels in your brain, stroke. Artery to your heart, heart attack. Okay? We have 2 more. And we didn't get to this part, but we did cover it. Blank, blank, Positive pressure breathing. That's why they fill up their throat, because they don't have a diaphragm to suck it in, so they fill their throat and it gets pulled in, right? It gets forced in. And final question, again, we didn't get to it today, but we did talk about it in class today. Respiratory pigments like hemoglobin allow greater blank concentration. Oops, this should have been oxygen, because hemoglobin is in the question. Oxygen's the answer. All right. Whoever ended up with the roll, oh look, Beth won, in case you guys were wondering. She killed it. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for coming. If you have questions, you can always ask. And whoever has the roll, please bring that to me.